Sometimes people say things that make you realize just how susceptible the human mind is to bullshit. Just how easily we can disconnect ourselves from reality. How easily we can ignore the facts. How easily we can end up embroiled in our own partisan delusions. Representative Lamar Smith, a Republican from Texas, said on Friday, in an interview with Fox News Channel, something that clearly revealed the ignorance to which humans can stoop, the sheer batshit insanity in which we can contort our minds. He stated that he didn't want to be radical, but to me the greatest threat to America is not necessarily a recession or even another terrorist attack. The greatest threat to America is a liberal media bias, and I think that because if the American people don't know the facts, they can't make good decisions, and if the American people can't make good decisions, then our democracy is threatened. He then proceeded to thank the Fox network for being the only balanced coverage out there, and it's much appreciated by a lot of us. The sheer inanity, stupidity, and presumptuous partisanship in that quote just reeks. It's despicably stupid. The sort of thing that anyone with an ounce of respect for reality knows is false. For any of you who don't understand how biased the Fox network is, I would suggest you watch some videos by the excellent YouTuber Liberal Viewer. But I think most of my viewers understand just how biased it is. Now, there is a media bias, and I'm not sure if it's a conservative or a liberal bias. What the media has is a corporate bias influence. It also has a bias towards the lowest common denominator, a pro-stupidity bias, if you will. And this is resulting in a misinformed populace. But Fox noise is part of the problem. Indeed, it's a bigger part of the problem than the other networks. You would think that there would be real people who have actually done work to increase the awareness of the American public, who Congressman Smith would be thanking. I mean, there are people he should be thanking, of course. Supposing that Representative Smith cared about an informed populace, about a functional democracy in which the citizens could make good decisions, the first person he might thank would be Amy Goodman, host of the radio show and television show now, Democracy Now!, which has for years been reporting on issues of war, human rights, and other stories that are completely ignored by the mainstream media, despite their immense importance. He would thank Radley Balco, who has been vigorously covering the growing militarization of American police forces and the encroachments that are going on against our rights, and who also edits the excellent libertarian periodical Reason magazine. He would thank Ed Brayton, a blogger and journalist who reports on science and civil liberties issues, and who still does investigative journalism properly. He would thank Pulitzer Prize winner David Barstow, who uncovered the fact that network news was using, as their military analysts and reporters, people who had stocks in military contracting firms, and who had been supported by the Pentagon to make a propaganda case for the war. He would thank Wendy McElroy, who keeps feminism as an anti-authoritarian force, and who has reported on encroachments against civil liberties quite effectively. He would thank Nat Hentoff, a courageous reporter and a jazz critic, as I may note, who has been willing to stand up for his convictions on civil liberties matters, yet has also managed to do so while being an anti-abortion activist, which is something with which I disagree, but more power to him for having the strength of his convictions and not being bound to any ideological framework. In the same vein, he would thank Christopher Hitchens, who is willing to report and critique anyone, regardless of a partisan or ideological affiliation. Mr. Hitchens will attack just about anyone, even the sacred cows of our society, and that's what makes him awesome. He would thank YouTube and the blogosphere for opening up political discourse to just about anyone, regardless of ideology, and for giving information a new home which anyone can access and to which anyone can contribute. He would thank WikiLeaks for leaking information from various governments so as to keep a well-informed populace. He would thank the Skeptics Society, the James Randi Educational Foundation, the Center for Inquiry, and other such institutions for supporting critical thinking and encouraging it among the public. He would thank Noam Chomsky for uncovering excellent data on our foreign policy and tirelessly reporting on the flaws in the American system, as well as Edward Herman, with which Chomsky wrote the book Manufacturing Consent, exposing a propaganda model of how news operates to serve corporate interests. Similarly, he would thank Howard Zinn if he cared about an informed populace, because Howard Zinn has made excellent headway in supporting a true understanding of history, including the crimes of our government in the past, and the history of popular movements. Mr. Zinn, as a historian, has managed to support a critical populace that is willing to question their government and to have excellent popular movements for change. That is someone he would thank. He would thank Al Jazeera, the BBC, and other foreign news sources, which have, for years now, been providing calmer and more rational coverage of issues than the American media. He would thank Penn and Teller and their television program on Showtime, Bullshit, for encouraging rational thought, scientific thought, and questioning of government. He would thank Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International for exposing the crimes of governments against human rights. He would thank such magazines as Scientific American, Discover, and Technology Review, as well as such scientists as Neil deGrasse Tyson, for explaining science to the general public, as it becomes ever more important in all our lives. He would thank Ayaan Hirsi Ali and other feminists who have spoken out against Islam's disrespect for women, in spite of threats on their lives. He would thank Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and other comedians who will point out hypocrisies in a hilariously incisive way and critique both the news media and the leaders. Representative Smith, if he cared about having a functional democracy and a truly informed population, would thank Reporters Without Borders for advocating a free press globally. He would thank such civil liberties groups as the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Coalition Against Censorship, and the Institute for Justice for defending free speech in all areas, so as to ensure that we can, as citizens, explore and advocate a range of views. He would thank the Independent Institute for their financing and work with a range of scholars without regard to partisan affiliations. There are so many people that someone who really cared about having a rationally informed democracy would thank. But does Representative Lamar Smith thank them? No, he does not. Nor will he. Nor will anyone in Washington. Why? Because your representatives, the politicians that work above you, claiming to work for you, they don't care about an informed populace, because an informed populace would not necessarily serve their interests as politicians. They care about their partisan interests. They care about getting reelected. And having a critical journalistic media does not serve that interest. So Republicans will thank Fox Noise and all their propagandizing bullshit, and Democrats will thank MSNBC and the like. And no one's going to thank the sorts of people I listed, who are genuinely critical, who genuinely think about what they're saying, and who serve a functional democracy, which, as Cornel West pointed out, he's a professor of Black Studies and Theology at Princeton, by the way. As Cornel West pointed out, however, democracy flourishes and flowers under the influence of a Socratic dialogue, under the influence of rational thought and the questioning and challenging of dogmas. That's how we have democracy. But sadly, that's not what the leaders, the privileged class, the corporatists want. And that's not what they support.
Suppose I get up on Nightline, say, I'm given whatever it is, 2 minutes, and I say Gaddafi is a terrorist, Khomeini is a murderer, et cetera, et cetera. The Russians, invaded Afghanistan, all this sort of stuff. I don't need any evidence. Everybody just nods. On the other hand, suppose you say something that just isn't regurgitating conventional pieties. Suppose you say something that's the least bit unexpected or controversial. Suppose you say,
I mean, the biggest international terror operations that are known are the ones that are run out of Washington.
Or suppose you say, what happened in the 1980s is the U.S. government was driven underground. Suppose I say the United States is invading South Vietnam, as it was. The Bible is probably the most genocidal book in our total canon. Well, you know, people will quite reasonably expect to know what you mean. Why did you say that? I never heard that before. If you said that, you better have a reason, you know, you better have some evidence. In fact, you better have a lot of evidence, because that's a pretty startling comment. You can't give evidence if you're stuck with concision, you know. That's the genius of this structural constraint.